Welcome to Earth, a Love Story. I'm your host, Robin Lassiter. I'm so excited to welcome my dear heart and soul friend, Dr. Carrie Murphy, onto the podcast. Carrie is a teacher, coach, and doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and she and I have shared many extraordinary experiences, including the extraordinary, ordinary experience of loving and supporting each other on our personal and spiritual journeys. In this conversation, we start at the Big Bang and land in the dangers of bypassing and the subtle and overt victim blaming that can happen around illness and suffering. And before we get into it, I am longing to report from the void where I've been for a while, from the bottom of the well, from the underworld, if the underworld wasn't a word or a concept, which it isn't, but an experience, which it is. And I'm also cognizant that there may be a mixed crowd listening to this episode, new folks who aren't used to my weird and wild. So I'm going to report from the void at the end of this episode, after the lovely conversation with the lovely Carrie Murphy. So if bad poetry and slightly dark, twisted, traumatizing dream images are your jam, stick around to the end. Back to Carrie. In her clinical work, she specializes in complex internal medicine cases and life transitions. Her coaching work utilizes the wisdom tradition of Chinese medicine to solve modern problems at work and at home. She teaches nationally at universities, conferences, and in small groups, providing continuing education opportunities to her peers on the subjects of the subtle body, herb-drug safety protocols, and integrative medicine strategy, and to the general public on meditation, the subtle body, and the 5 elements. She's a manifesting generator, can you tell? All of Carrie's offerings are designed to empower you to step more fully into a life that is vibrant, authentic, and free, and the work that I've done with Carrie has brought me closer to that kind of life. I often say on this podcast, how do we start with UFOs and end up feeling our feelings? This episode is a great example of that journey. We are whole beings. The archetype of the UFO, or any ontologically challenging experience, cracks open reality, and then we're sent on a journey to discover what is actually going on here and how we fit into it all. This episode takes us on that journey, from the farthest reaches of space and conceptual thought into our very subtle channels and bodies. It's a really fun ride, and you'll likely see yourself reflected again and again in Carrie's words and presentations of the 5 elements and the chakras. Carrie is also going to be offering a workshop in September, and she'll be leading us through practices and prompts around the 5 elements. Check the show notes for information about that offering and to work with Dr. Carrie Murphy directly. Okay, without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with my friend, the delightful Carrie Murphy.
You know, one thing that I want to talk about today is the 5 phases and their psychological importance and function, and helping people sort of see that within themselves and work with it. And so to really do it right, we would have to start with the Big Bang, if that's okay.
Please start with the Big Bang. Yes.
Go back a little bit for context. You know, apparently, it seems that there was nothing anywhere. And then nothing got so intense that it exploded into everything. And here we are, and it's still exploding. It's an ongoing explosion, and that's what all of this is, which is pretty wild, and it's hard to grapple with. But in Chinese medicine, which is based in Taoism, that explosion is a field. And if you've seen the yin and yang symbol, you know, the fishes, that is not a symbol of two things. It's not a symbol of yin and yang, a symbol of matter and energy. It's a symbol of the interplay of everything that has exploded interacting with itself in an ongoing way. And yin and yang, matter and energy, are made up of essence. We use the word essence, which I appreciate so much because otherwise you're saying stuff, or what's this energy that everything's made of, or what's this stuff that everything's made of. And the whole point is it's not stuff and it's not energy. There's this other stuff or energy, which we call essence. And that's the exploding, expanding, all of it that we are currently. And it helps to position ourselves there to begin because otherwise you're a person on the planet or you're someone in the universe as opposed to being nothing other than the universe expanding. You're not. If we're separate from that and we're looking at it, we're like, gee, what the hell is going on out there? That doesn't function as well. Although we are also witnessing it as we are it. And so that's sort of the ground of any kind of this kind of work. And so then you say, well, I can't really interact with that. Like, how do I figure out what I want to do for a living if I'm the universe expanding? It's just a little bit too big. And what Chinese medicine delineates is that there are 5 phases that this essence moves through as it is becoming form and interacting as form. There are these 5 phases, like vapor, solid, plasma kind of vibe. And the 5 phases are described using the elements. So we talk about this essence, and I'm going to get more specific here, but just to contextualize it, I want to go all the way out to come all the way in. These 5 elements show and depict how essence phases through as form as we go through the seeming form realm, the seeming materiality. And also this obvious energy that we are. I can feel my energy in my body. I can feel my matter in my body. And those two things are interpenetrative, they're interdependent, they're co-creative, and they're made of the same essence. They're not two things. It's not two things. It's all the same essence. And the 5 elements are how we further kind of condense it down into form so we can grapple with it. And in Chinese medicine, the elements are earth, metal, water, wood, and fire. So a little different than other systems that have ether and air. And I think Chinese medicine is more work-a-day. It's really about how things are working in form. So they're all quite material. And that doesn't mean there isn't ether or space or something like that. It's just like that's not really what we're talking about when we're talking about having a body, which is ultimately what medicine is working with, is like, what is it to have a body and how do we live in here and what are we going to do with it? And what's good and bad and what's right and wrong, what's healthy and what's not healthy. And we're so confused, I think, in this moment. No one who listens to this podcast could possibly imagine that the way that we're working with health and mental health in a time of complete global meta crisis is truly sane. And if the world isn't sane, how would a sane person look in an insane situation? And how can we return sanity, wholeness, health, ground, ease to our situation?
Thank you for starting with the Big Bang and bringing it all the way to the body. You know how much I center the body as the experience to have, for me and a collective of others. It's the place to be in this incarnation. And it's so mysterious. And we don't culturally really know how to work with it or what to do. There are a lot of rules. There are a lot of guidelines. There are a lot of diets. There are a lot of, exercise plans. There's these things, and they continue to like concretize the idea that there's a split between not just body and mind, but between, yeah, like matter and energy. That there's this thing over here and it's all separate. And if you put all the ingredients together in the right way, then maybe you can come up with something that feels good or easeful or powerful or whatever you're trying to accomplish. And that hasn't worked for me for a really long time. And it doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And it's very overwhelming. And it's very easy to internalize that, like, I'm the one fucking it up. And if I could
Yeah.
just figure it out and like get all the pieces together, and then it would work. So I love that. I love that we've landed in the body. I'm just following guidance and what's up as you were talking. And I want to touch on, before we go deeply into like the elements and your realizations about the chakra system, which I'm really fascinated by, I want to touch on a couple of sort of mystical experiences that you've had that seem to tie into this, particularly your positioning and understanding of being in this expanding space, that's this exploding space, and these golden threads that are sort of stabilizing that process.
Yeah, I felt that come through when I was talking about it. I was like, "Oh, this is that." I did have a vision experience during a journey with you of really asking because I'm always really grappling with what is going on here. What is this realm? Why are we here? It seems so hard. Why are we embodied? It seems so hard. And one of those splits that you're talking about is spirit and body. And so many spiritual traditions and religions can somehow seem to be saying that spirit's better, you know, and body is sinful. And we got to transcend it and get back to sky. And for me, that doesn't resonate, and I've asked everyone I've ever met who I thought might have an answer here of like, why are we in body if it's everything is so terrible? And I was in Kathmandu and I was at a Dharma talk at a monastery up the mountain. And this guy gave us this 3 hour talk and it was totally amazing. And at the end, I said, if we're in samsara and, we're in this really difficult suffering realm and there's a consciousness that would allow us to transcend it, why did we come into form in the first place? Like, what are we even, the hell?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, we only kind of did. And then of course the dinner bell rang and that I couldn't get any more details on it, but that idea that this is somehow a mistake or a punishment or the body is something to shed and not the whole point of our existence is being incarnate, that is like, is it a feature or a bug, And so I asked this question with some urgency and some frequency. And so when I was in the journey, I was in a space with some guides and I asked, what are we doing here? And one of them stepped forward and showed me almost like a holodeck kind of situation, showed me this explosion and this, I guess like sphere. Nothing explodes into everything and the sphere expands in a globular kind of way. And the point of expansion is expansion. The point of expansion and growth is itself, curiosity, ultimate, boundless, Godhead, curiosity. But that as we're exploding, and that's an ongoing thing. The Big Bang isn't something that happened and now we're static. We continue expanding and we start to lose a little bit of integrity. It gets a little wobbly, just like a bubble gets too big and it bursts. And that consciousness is like these golden threads that run through this orb or sphere that provides some structural integrity to the whole thing, that stabilizes it so that it can continue to grow. And those of us who are all the way in density in this really dense part of the sphere are grounding. that golden light into the more relatively physical part of it to provide stability for the expansion. And that felt good to me. That felt really hopeful. And also like something I could do, you know. And I feel my body as a meditator. I often have felt my body as sort of a tube or a channel that all this light comes through. And that we'll bring that back when we talk about the chakras as well, that there's this almost like a skylight at my crown, and when it opens, it just lets all this golden sunlight beam straight down directly into the earth, and this anchoring, which is also a Chinese medicine concept and, an indigenous concept. There's so many traditions that have this, the penetrative yang sun energy piercing the earth and illuminating and impregnating, and this sort of play of existence between illuminating consciousness and the very densest parts of us, which are just the two ends of the spectrum of essence. They're not two separate things. And in Chinese medicine, the yin and yang is not a line, it's a circle. And it's really a globe. You really, when you see that yin and yang sign, you shouldn't see a flat thing. You should see a globe. And you should see those two fish-looking guys playing in that globe. And in 4 dimensions, in 10 dimensions. It's not a 2-dimensional concept. And it's not a line. This has been the core concept of at least the last 26 years of my life. Since 1999, when I went to acupuncture school and really got into what does this symbol mean. And what I appreciate so much about acupuncture school is we start with the biggest concept. And then everything else is an example of it, which helps me a lot more because in Western medicine school, which I went to an integrative medical school, so I was doing, kind of like Chinese medicine in the morning, Western medicine in the afternoon. And when you introduce Chinese medicine to a student, you start with yin and yang, which is in essence, the concept. And everything is an example of it. Everything is a version of it it's what we're dealing with. It's the project. And in Western medicine, you start with parts of a cell. For the first year and a half on the Western side, I was like, I don't understand what you guys are talking about. And I didn't understand Western medicine until we got to pathophysiology. Like a patient comes in with this and that problem, what isn't working? And then I was like, whoa. And then I could go all the way back to parts of a cell and see how everything had to work in order to create this function. And if it didn't, how to look back. It's just how my mind works. I really appreciate starting. And that's why I wanted to start with the Big Bang, because it really helps to contextualize the project, which is what I'm interested in.
You and I are the same in that way. I'm always trying to trace back to the source and figure out what is this and how did we get here and what's happening and when was there a split, if there was a split, and why does it feel like there's a split? And is that, all of these questions all the time is what I'm with.
Yeah, did something break?
Yes.
Right. I mean, that's a big question. Did something break? And are we fallen? Or is this hell? Are we, and that's an important question. And I appreciate that you're so interested in it, because I sometimes walk around in the world and I feel like, Linda Hamilton at the beginning of Terminator 3, where she's just like, why isn't anyone paying attention to this? Freaking out. And so I appreciate, the opportunity to explore it a little bit, talk about it.
Yeah. There's always the both and, the paradox, the and this happening in these spaces. And it's like, did something break? In some places, it seems like a split. In some places, I can take a perspective of what you were talking about, that there's this expanding thing and it's not broken and it gets a little wobbly and we're stabilizing it. And the golden threads that you're talking about are similar to the golden frequency. There's also, this feels soaked in non-duality and also not in denial of the relative, like in the duality that we live in every day, and we have to like cook food and get in our cars and, do these things that feel very in this world and difficult and strange. And so, yes, I love that. I love that that starting with the yin yang, everything is expressed. Like it's not, there's nowhere that it's not, that
Yeah.
it is
There's
everywhere. It is
nothing that's
everything. Yeah.
not that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Including us. And the non-duality of it, exactly as you said, it's so practical, and pragmatic because you can have a realization, oh my gosh, it's all one, it's all, but within that, sometimes yin gets really dominant and yang seems to almost collapse. And the collapse of yang that's why the fish have eyes, is the birth of yang within ultimate yin. It's at midnight, it's dead darkness. And at midnight and 1/10 of a second, it's morning.
Mm.
So there's this, if you take a snapshot at any given moment, it seems as if there's this and that. But if you back up from it, there is not this and that. But there is an interplay. And if you're driving down the street, you really want to be able to recognize red and green, right and left. It doesn't mean that these are absolutes, right and left, red and green, and in many ways, red and green are not opposites, but they're something that we're using to play around with and be a part of this play, and then the next division is the five elements, which again is sort of recognizing. And of course, there's no one and no thing that is only comprised of an element, because the elements are themselves an expression of essence phasing through materiality, and again, it's like, yeah, this is an expression of something. This is a version of something in a way that it tends to like to express as it moves through materiality. And when we can witness that pattern and get into the pattern recognition of it, instead of always thinking, oh, I'm falling apart, my health has collapsed, I have a million different things going on, one of my joys in work is to be like, that's all wood. You just came in with 15 health crises, but it's all in one category in my accounting. And so we can get wood expressing healthily, which is a small change in comparison to I need everything that's going on with me to be opposite.
Mm. So talk about the five elements a little bit and give concrete example of what that would look like if there's too much of one thing and it feels like what the remedy would be to do the opposite, but it's actually not to do the opposite. It's to, as you've told me, do a quarter turn.
Yeah. Thank you. The five elements each have an organ system, a couple of channels, and a physiological capacity, a cognitive capacity, and an emotional capacity that they confer through the body like Wi-Fi or sometimes I think about like if the body is a house, which it isn't, but just a metaphor. There's the plumbing is the movement of water through the body, and the nervous system is the wiring. And the channels are more subtle than the nerves. The nervous system, you could cut into a body and pull out a nerve and show it to a classroom full of people. You can display it at a museum. The sciatic nerve is a palpable object on the planet. We all have a couple of them. And the channels are not like that. You can't extract the lung channel from the body. So we're at a subtler level, but I would say only maybe one click subtler
Mm.
because they do have a pathway that is the same pretty much on everyone, bilateral on everyone. They pool into acupuncture points at the same place on everyone. So they don't have materiality exactly, but they certainly do have. They're not a metaphor for something else.
Mm.
The channels are really channels, and they're pathways through which a certain kind of energy can flow. And again, the energy that's flowing in your channels is all one thing. But as it moves through the lung channel, it sort of confers a bunch of lung stuff on that area of the body or the gallbladder channel or whatever. So, it's a little it can be a little tricky to get your head wrapped around it, and it doesn't matter. You don't have to get your head wrapped around it. But what's really up for me lately with the five elements is that, for example, if we take metal, the emotional and cognitive capacity that metal confers on each one of us is our ethical, upright nature, our ability to discern right from wrong, and our ability to do what is right and turn away from what is wrong. And that's a big conference of powers that we get. And that arises from or condenses into, depending on your perspective, the lung and large intestine channel, and their ability to let go and exhale and excrete and let go and move through. One of the tricks of having integrity is not holding on to, oh, but I want that. So I have integrity, except I'm going to steal this pen because I want it. The ability to let go of things is really critical in having integrity and ethics and righteousness. But it's a quick move into rigidity, or everything is black and white and my way or the highway. And this pencil is not straight on my desk, so I can't work. And most of us have, in any given point in our lives, a dominant energy that's expressing. Oftentimes we have a dominant expression throughout our lifetimes, and oftentimes we don't. And so I've been really moving in my practice away from saying, oh, you're fire, Robin. You are that. And more into your sort of, this is expressing as fire for you right now, and let's look at that. So if something is expressing as metal to someone and they're getting really rigid and uptight, the world is going to tell them, you're so anal. Would you just chill out a little bit, smoke a joint, and like unclench? There can be this unkind, like what you should be is the opposite of how you are. And in the five elements, we look at, well, what softens metal if metal gets rigid? And the answer is heat. Fire, you anneal metal into something a little softer. And when it's softer, it's stronger, it's more flexible, but it's still metal. You're not trying to make metal into a plant. You're not saying you're just wrong. And so I want you to be the opposite of what you are. So we'll take some of the gifts from fire, like social connection, laughter, engagement with purpose. And we'll use that to soften metal a little bit so that it can melt into its healthiest state. And another example would be if we look at fire, and fire gives us the capacity to communicate, to be charming, to be dazzling, to be someone who really has a sparkling eyes and lots of eye contact, and the ability to express a really playful, imaginative, joyful idea, and to create art. Fire people look at a blank sheet of paper and they write down a symphony on it, or they paint the most incredible painting you've ever seen. It's like they're living in, there's so much possibility around them, and they just blaze with all this creativity, joy, fun, play. That can be too much when you're 5 and your kindergarten teacher is trying to teach you the alphabet, and you're like a magical fairy princess slaying a dragon. Your teacher needs you to not be doing that. Or maybe your parent needs you to learn how to close the door behind you. And you're not strong with closing the door behind you because you're in this pure potential land, and maybe talking to spirits and maybe seeing interdimensional beings. And, fire is the least material of these 5. And so it has the most connection to, and I mean this in the best sense of the word, imagination and capacities to hold what is not obviously in front of everyone. And oftentimes what happens is the fire children get completely put out. They try to repress or suppress so that you can learn how to, be toilet trained, or so that you can learn how to exist in the world and the overculture. And instead of saying, I love your creativity and all this passion, and I want to make sure it has a lot of outlets. And at certain moments, I need you to be able to focus in and pay attention to the 3D world and close the door behind you and learn math or something like that, and so finding the way there's no, and what happens later in life with fire element people is they get really anxious because instead of being allowed to express their creativity and their vision, it gets turned against itself, and their creativity becomes catastrophe and apocalypse, envisioning catastrophe. And so they'll be lying in bed being like, well, I guess, my boss wasn't happy with my last project. So probably I'm going to get laid off and then I'm not going to be able to find more projects and I'm going to lose the house. I would move in with my mom, but our building doesn't take cats. So I guess I'm going to have to live out of my car. And pretty soon, they've invented this whole world of imagination that is a disaster, and they're vibrating with the anxiety of this made up thing. And then what do you do when you say like, help, I'm really anxious? People say, why don't you relax? Just drop all that. Settle, forget about it. You're too intense. This is just imagination, just here, take a pill or whatever. And it's still about putting that fire out instead of saying, this is your creativity that hasn't been allowed to express fully. So let's find some openings. And the acupuncture points are openings that allow something to open and express and start to flow again so that that fire person can be making art and using their creative imagination to be telling stories and writing books and writing symphonies and goofing around and playing and experiencing the world in that very special fire way, in a wholesome way that works for them. So that's the quarter turn. Instead of trying to be, you're never going to get happy or healed trying to be the opposite of yourself. That's never going to do it. And yet somehow that is the message of most of our systems. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying about food or how to even take care of our bodies is like, whatever you like and want, and however you like to do it, just the opposite of that. Just never do that again. And we kind of know from the research that that doesn't create change. Like, obviously, but also we have research that that does not create change. Trying to be the opposite of who you are, it doesn't last. And things that last don't last, don't create change.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was too much of a fire hose or if you're with me or.
I'm completely with you, and you dropped like 30 things. Also, I feel like seen and called out a little bit with all the fire stuff in a really good way.
Well, I just want to say it's not to say I hoped that you wouldn't feel called out, but I didn't want to stop talking. But I know that you have witnessed in vision apocalypse and all different kinds of versions of that. And I'm not saying that's your fire element gone screwy,
Mm-hmm.
because we are seers and our visionaries and our people who look into the field of essence and see some patterns coming back at them or some timelines or some potentials coming back at them. That's not pathology. It's pathology to be lying in your bed deciding that what's about to happen is you're going to be homeless
Right.
because of some imaginary thing.
Yeah. 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 No, you know this, and now I will tell everyone, like, you are one of the people on this planet that I trust the most. And in fact, when I've done parts work and it's like I'm looking for something for like someone, it's like I go to Carrie. Like I can trust Carrie. And so the calling out, like what I saw, I was kind of on my timeline as you were describing that. I saw myself as a child having those experiences. I saw times in my life when I was laying in bed absolutely catastrophizing. I saw the transformation that creativity brings for me. So that's, and also it's a little like I can feel a little bit of the vulnerability of just because it's really up for me right now, like the visions and the apocalypse stuff and all of that is so up for me. So called out in the best way, and just more than called out, just seen. Like I just feel really seen by that. So
And I would love to, just so that everyone gets to have that experience. I just did two of the elements. And if I can take a
yeah.
minute or two to do the other three, I sense somebody out there being like, do me.
Yeah, same. I felt that too.
um,
Yeah.
and again, just to reiterate that we all contain all of these, that these are not things. that this is the way that the essence that we are organizes itself as it moves through form and forms itself. And that's us. That's what's going on. So there are moments when, I've had the experience when I was in school, I thought, oh, I'm wood. I'm obviously wood. I'm definitely wood. And then I was at a conference and I ended up having breakfast with like the world's foremost authority on the five elements. And he was like, well, you're obviously fire. And I was like, I'm fire? And he was like, yeah. And then I was talking to a friend recently and she was like, you're water, you
Mm.
know? And I think that that's all true. That's all completely true. And at times, and in our culture, sometimes people say, no, I'm not gonna accept all this fire from you. So sometimes I would joke like I'm fire with wood rising. I had to adopt a different kind of element to get through school. So wood is not a desk, but like a bamboo forest. It's this branching, benevolent, very connected and grounded down into earth, very connected all the way down into the water table, and reaching all the way up toward the sun and turning sunlight into green and flowers and fruit and providing shade and a home for birds. And there's more beings live in a tree than people live in my city.
Mm.
Like the absolute expansiveness of the wood element. And its cognitive capacity is systems thinking and problem solving. And so this is another version of creativity, but it's like the actor or the oboe player. It's the person who gets the piece of art and interprets it. It's the person who, they might be a business consultant because somebody has an idea and they're like, I know how to ground this idea into a thing that would work. And I could see the problem 5 clicks out. I can see the problem with this and how it's going to, and what we have to correct for. So there's this branching visionary. It rules the eyes, vision, ambition, like all the layers of seeing, relative seeing, not quite as psychic, intuitive, imaginative, but more like I totally get how this world works and I can make stuff happen here. And, a wood person is the kind of person where you hit an impediment and they're like, oh my gosh, this is even better because now we can do the thing that we were going to do 2 things away. They're often leaving other people at a boardroom table in the dust. They go 3 steps at a time and they can see 5 years out or 50 years out. And so wood element is super exciting to engage with. It's super exciting to be around. But because wood element is often going faster than everybody around them, they start getting frustrated. And then maybe they're not the boss, which is terrible. If you've got a wood element person, just try to make them the boss of something. If they have a boss who's like, no, that's not going to work. What? That's a little too much. Like, let's table that for another time. They start getting resentful. Or I should say, we start getting resentful. And wood can get really aggravated. They can start to feel, if they're too impeded, they'll start to feel too impeded and frustrated. Sometimes I think about that scene in Aaron Brockovich where he's like, I need the name, phone number, and address and symptoms of everybody in the town. And she just leaves and she's gone for 3 months and he thinks she flaked, but then she comes back and she has all of it in her mind. And they're like, no, you don't. And she's like, yes, I do. And I always think that's how to be the boss of a wood element person is give them a project and don't say a word to them until they come back because they will have it all done and it will be amazing. But if you micromanage them, they will get frustrated. And this is true in relationship. You got to let wood element people expand and make new choices and look at things from the opposite side. And when wood people get aggressive, people say, you're so reactive, and they can become depressed is like the worst, is that they go absolutely down. But the middle point where we're mostly interacting with wood element is they're just so frustrated because people don't understand what the hell they're talking about. And what they're saying is so obviously right to them, they can see it with their eyeballs. And everybody else is looking at the same thing and not seeing it. And so fire element is sort of seeing with the third eye. Wood element is seeing with 2 eyes. The color is green. It's like these eyes see that. I want to do it. I'm going to make it happen. Stand back or like, here's everybody's job and we're going to go. And when that gets too consistently criticized, and up until now and maybe still now, our culture doesn't always love it in a woman.
Mm.
because it's too bossy or it's too confident, it's arrogant, it's know-it-all. And it can be that, but it also can be, but I do know it. And so we can get a really frustrated, aggravated, irritated wood person. And people are like, you should really be nicer. You should really be more patient. You should really be kinder. You should be slower. And wood element is like, I'm a goddamn tree. I am making this for you. You are going to be rich and happy when I'm done with you. Like, stand back. I'm an oak tree. I'm a cherry tree. There's going to be flowers, fruit, leaves, birds, butterflies, worms, freaking you name it. And I feel it coming up in myself. That's just wood energy of let me do this thing. Let the forest forest. And so again, we're just told that the way we are is wrong and we should not be like this. Instead of this little quarter turn, which is you might need to slow down and connect the dots for the people around you, not because they're stupid, but because you skipped a step and they can't see it. And so go back and explain it. And oftentimes for wood element people, having to explain something feels really patronizing. And so the quarter turn for wood element people is it's not patronizing to show your work. It's not condescending to explain where you're coming from and where you got your ideas from. That's wood. And water. And we'll end with earth. That'll feel really special. So water is the intuitive, the unconscious, the dream space, the unknown. It's water is the ocean. It's not a glass of water. It's the wave and the water. And its emotional capacity is courage to face the unknown. And it's not courage because I did a bunch of research and I found out there aren't any man-eating sharks in this part of the waters, but self-trust. I am the man-eating shark in this part of the water. It's like, I am the water. I'm the one, not to be threatening, but it's this belief that I can go into the underworld and be there and move through it and swim through it, not because it's safe, but because I know how to swim. And that's water. And water can be invisible to people because water is not loud. And the water element person is quiet but deep and often gets sort of trampled or misunderstood or it's like, why aren't you more friendly or why aren't you more talkative or why aren't you more, and what water wants to do is engage with where they're experiencing from, which can be a very deep place and not everyone is interested in going to. And so water can start to self-doubt because of not being seen. And then water isn't able to swim into swim through that deep place in the same way and can become phobic, can really become, so this is an example of where we don't need water to get into public speaking, but we want water to be able to trust this deepest, deepest self that is expressing. And finally, earth. Earth is earth. Earth is our body. It's the center. It's the farmland. It's where all nourishment is coming up from. And it's also the farm in this way that it's these rows. It's orderly. There's something about earth that is the continents more or less stay in place. It's generative. If we plant a seed, something will come back out to us from it. It is relational. It is physical. And it's the hearth. The earth element person just wants everybody to come over. They just want all their friends to wear their seatbelts. They just want everyone to be okay and safe. And they made us pumpkin muffins and they love us. But they don't always want us to go out into the world and be our wildest expression of ourselves. They want us to be home tucked into bed and safe. And so Earth is both, the Earth is a mother, it's a mother energy, and that's protective and nourishing and a place to return to again and again, and a place of some solidity, and can get stagnant. That's what Earth element types can get a little stagnant and can get judgmental. Like, well, I guess that's nice for you. A little sniffy, a little passive aggressive. And the quarter turn away from that is that Earth is really happy for everybody. Earth really wants everybody to be who they are. That's the center. That's the center of all of this and materiality.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that journey. And now I feel seen through like a prism, right? Because I can feel
Yes.
and see all of those things in me as well, even the healthy expression of it and then the not so healthy expression of it. I can see myself in all of those ways. And it's intriguing to be like, oh, I can even feel inside of me places where there's sort of an imbalance or an over expression of something and an under expression of something else. So it's really fascinating.
And when the elements feel seen, and that's what I'm looking for is like with the wood element of saying, I can feel how capable you are to solve this problem, and that it feels frustrating that you're not being given the reins to solve it, rather than you're so reactive and irritable. Why do you hate everybody?
Right.
I don't hate everybody. I'm trying to solve this problem for you, and you're in my way. So there's a wholesome expression, a whole like, and healthy expression, and it comes from being seen. And all of us have early and possibly continuous over culture wounding around this because we've been told that how we are is not right instead of taught to express it in the healthiest way, which feels best for us anyway.
Yeah.
We're suffering when we're not doing that, and we're creating suffering around us.
Yeah. As you say that, I can feel the kind of ease, like shoulder dropping, welcoming, not the split, not the separation, but the drawing in of all of these ways of being and ways of expressing that is expressing, as you said, the essence and how sacred that all is and how it's coming through these lenses. And I keep thinking as well of the phrase to me that came through a long time ago when I was really struggling was, I can't hate myself enough to become someone that I could love.
Yeah.
That it's like, as you said, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Not only is it sort of, I can feel the pain of that now, and also it just doesn't work. And so what else can we do? And over again, when I get to what, kind of zoomed out as much as I can, what it feels to me is over and over again, can I be a space of like love and welcoming? And that's what this feels like. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
you know, and being seen, it's so interesting that that the healthy expression comes from being seen,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
probably in self and in others, being witnessed from the outside, but also seeing the self in that way. Yeah, it's beautiful.
I think so. I mean, I just think it's one of the great wisdom traditions on the planet. And I'm so grateful to the Chinese teachers and practitioners who brought it to this country, who were then immediately oppressed. The Chinese doctors who brought Chinese medicine to this country taught a bunch of doctors on the West Coast about acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and those doctors immediately wrote board examinations that were in complicated English that those Chinese immigrants had to pass in order to practice the medicine they had taught the white guys. So it hasn't been a smooth or kind or correct or proper road, and there's real repair that needs to happen there in the relationship of white people even kind of getting to talk about this or practice with it or express it or teach it. And I think the benefit of the teachings coming through will help the medicine and who owns it and who gets to use it and who benefits from it to repair, the initial breach, and boundary violation that absolutely happened, as it's happened again and again and again throughout culture, of a wisdom tradition being somehow co-opted and monetized and stolen and repackaged and rebranded.
My perception is that I can really feel you in service to the teachings and to the essence of that, which was transmitted through them and coming through, and that's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my desire, and it's my desire for anyone in the field is to always be pointing back to, our patients might say, wow, you're amazing, you're a miracle worker. And the answer is always Chinese medicine is incredibly strong. This wisdom tradition has so much for us. It's not coming from me, it's coming through me. And I was fortunate enough to be taught it and to hold it. And I do want to be in service to it. And it is in service to us all. This is we are trying to reduce suffering here. So sometimes people say, oh, I don't treat symptoms, I treat the root. It's like, well, the symptoms are an expression of the root problem. And of course, we do want less suffering. I do want to treat symptoms. I do treat symptoms. But I see the symptoms as expressing the sort of a deeper imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
And that imbalance, which is so uncomfortable for us, and that arises typically from something not getting to work the way it wants to work and not getting to express the way it wants to express. And that creates so much pain. And if ever there was a split, that's the split.
Mm.
If ever there was a fall, it's like somehow weaponizing our bodies against us, weaponizing us against the earth, weaponizing a wisdom tradition somehow into you're broken, I'm going to fix you. It's really not that. It's the system is really working, and it's maybe working at cross purposes. But if we remove some impediment to it and create a little bit of modeling for what's the healthy version of this, it's just right there. It just opens right up into it. It's instantaneous, and that's an amazing thing to witness
Yeah.
and to be a part of.
I can feel this big tangent, and maybe I'll ask you to come back on the podcast so we can talk about it. But the tangent being my meaning making around this split is always the feminine principle kind of being put into the underworld thousands and thousands of years ago, and that we are witnessing that and witnessing the return of that wholeness, and that's a lot of this as well. And those are words to describe like an archetype and a feeling and a experience that seems to be happening through a collective of people. So I just like it's calling, but we're going to come back to that. You have to come back on and we'll talk about that a lot.
Great, great. And I would say, like, yeah, you said it. I mean, you
Mm.
just said it. I don't even know if we need to go farther with it. We can, but
Yeah,
that's
that's
it.
it. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm also hearing as you're talking about these, kind of having like an impediment to the expression
Hmm.
and through this system that has somehow like turned us against ourselves or turned us against our body or vice versa. I'm hearing and seeing this vision of the chakras and these
Hmm.
kind of like choke points, which chakras are often thought of as these beautiful energy centers, which that works too. And also that there's seems to be a way for flow to happen through this central channel and then these points where it gets stopped. And I know that you've had an experience and it like the teaching around chakras sort of came to you. And I would love to hear that story and then what you've learned and what you can teach us about chakras.
Sure. Thank you so much. I love talking about chakras, and I relish the opportunity. And I don't think it's super clear what chakras are. I mean, different traditions have different depictions of them, and I think I think the best way to work with it is they're probably all correct. When I started out as a young acupuncturist in 2003, I had learned all the channel pathways, and the channels, 19 of the 20 of them go up and down the body, and one of them goes around. But they're long, they're linear. And when I started working with patients, I started to have kind of like one patient a day would come in. And instead of having a problem all along a channel, like my jaw hurts, my shoulder, my rib cage, my hip, my ankle, and I'd be like, oh, that's the gallbladder channel, that's lateral channel. They would be like, I have TMJ, I get strep throat twice a year, I have ringing in my ears, I have tooth grinding, my voice has been really off. I feel like, and I'd be like, what the heck is that's not a channel? That seems like there's this zone of trouble. And then I would see that kind of case a couple of times. And then somebody would come in and they would have, like fibroids and low back pain and constipation and a labral tear. And I'd be like, what the heck, man? This isn't going along a channel, it's going in. I started calling them zones. And I noticed there was one, sort of around the epigastrium, like the upper abdomen, and one at the heart, one at the throat, one at the neck. And just started to notice that certain pathologies seem to be clustering not along a channel, but more in a central zone of the body. And then I was just playing with it. I was just noticing it, not knowing what to do with it, and being like, "Oh shoot, I must have missed something in school or whatever. I must. What do I not know? Is so much that I don't know." Because it can be kind of an overwhelming medicine to start practicing. It's big, It takes time to get it. And I went to a yoga class, and they had a map of the chakras on the wall, and I was like, "Oh dang, that's the zones." And I went up to the yoga teacher and said, "What is this? What is this?" And she said, "The chakras." And I was like, "What is that? Is there a book about it?" She was like, "Yes, there's a book about it." So I started kind of reading about it and finding information on it. And this was probably like 2005. So you couldn't just Google everything in the world, or ChatGPT couldn't just explain it to you or something. So I had this piecemeal mystical, books falling into my hands kind of thing with the chakras. And so I began my studies there, and I realized if you lay the map of the chakras over a map of the channels, things start really making sense. Because not only are our channels coming into and going out of organs, they're coming into and going out of whole centers. It's almost like massive train stations and then the train line, or the ocean and the river, and I started to really see. So I started to teach continuing education to my peers. I've done a lot of teaching around the country, teaching chakras to acupuncturists. And the way that I see it as someone who works with the system, who studied the system, and as a meditator, is I've often had an experience of feeling like I have a skylight at the top of my head and a beam of sunshine coming right through the center and shining down on my pelvic floor, and then even going further into the earth. And I've witnessed it almost like my grandmother's hallway when I was a little kid, this sort of dusty hallway, and it had this high window and this beam of light coming through this sort of dusty golden room, and hitting the floor. And I remember sitting in that beam of light, and I have that experience too as a meditator. And then the chakras, like you said, prismatic, that this light hits the human body, and the human body has this function maybe of, oh shoot, I don't know the word, diffracting, refracting, science, whatever, into the spectrum, into the rainbow, and that we have this body and it's hit by this light. We glow the rainbow, and it comes out the front, it comes out the back, and each chakra has one of those colors, which is a wavelength, which is a vibration. And I've also had the experience in meditation of witnessing that all those chakras are in the same place, or they're all vibrating at the same frequency. So it's all the same. It's all one, and this is a way that when I ground and stabilize at my root, everyone's root chakra gets a benefit. This is a place in the field of essence where we're all vibrating. The same vibration is flowing through all of us. The same is flowing through all the essence in a non-locality way or in a hyper-locality way, or again, just insert some science. I don't really know, but that's my experience of the chakras. Is it's sunlight hits the human body and we glow and we're a rainbow, and that each, just like with the channels, just like with the elements, each chakra has this capacity that it confers and a way that it can get wounded. So is it a flower? Is it a vortex? Is it a choke point? Yeah. I mean, yeah, depending on how it's going, I think. And so the root chakra has a lot to do with grounding and being able to receive and pull up from the earth and know that you're part of this thing and you're not alone, you're not cut off, and that you're safe where you are. Safe is a weird word because are we safe? No. But are we safe? Maybe. So this funny thing of when we're in form, we're vulnerable, but that doesn't mean we're not safe.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean we're not held. And it doesn't mean that we're not in company. And then as we move up, we turns to orange in the second chakra, which is really about community and our people and resources and having our emotional needs witnessed and met. If you had a parent who knew you were hungry before you did, having your needs witnessed and met, and the joy that a tribe can take in taking care of its children. We're happy we have resources so we can give them to you, that feeling. There's a lot of wounding there. And
Mm-hmm.
then up into the third chakra where we emerge from the tribe as an individual. And that's like the sunrise, this yellow, bright kid being like, I'm going to do it myself, or I'm going to leave the tribe. I know we're Catholics, but maybe I'm a Tibetan Buddhist, or maybe I'm an actor, or maybe I'm a wild, maybe I'm a Wiccan, and so like we have this spirit of individuality. And some tribes love to see it, and some tribes are very against it. So like how human culture and how each of us individually has had to navigate this pathway of consciousness of, and if we go back to my vision, this golden light comes in, it pierces the deepest part of form, and then we refill as this consciousness through the human body, and there's this pathway of evolving capacity, and then we come push up through the diaphragm into really conscious the heart space, which is, it's also, to me, it's very tree, like this beautiful, benevolent, beneficent, we're all here for each other. I'm here for you and you're here for me. But it's not the same as the second chakra where it was the tribe because we went through individual. And now the individual joins a collective of individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this all we get to be in company, in tribe, but not in lockstep. We don't all have to be the same to be accepted and to accept. And that this unconditional regard that we hold for each other, which is the true nature of love. I always get irritated when people say unconditional love because there's no such thing as conditional love. If it's conditional, it's approval. That's not love, So love that arises through having gone through the experience of leaving the tribe as an individual and then finding belonging again without sacrificing true expression of self. And the true expression of self is the fifth chakra. So that comes out in your throat and your jaw and your mouth, but also your ears. Can you listen to someone else's true expression of self and have experienced cognitive dissonance? Like, wow, that's not exactly the same as my truth. And have it expand you rather than say only one of us can live, which is a problem that we're currently engaging with in our world. And then that capacity to see and perspective take is the sixth chakra, that ability to have 360-degree vision of and other people's perspectives and where they're coming from and where they've been and also how they're like us. I would be that way too if I had been brought up in that way, or I've been that way too in moments when I felt threatened, or I could be that way too, like that person's so cool and I could be like that too. The ability to see all of us as having a fundamental unity and similarity. And then the seventh chakra is the hatch. That hatch just pops open at the top of your head and all the light pours in and you're connected to spirit or God or the field or essence or everything or whatever it is. And the more and more that we can open, the more and more we can bring through, the more and more we can ground into this realm, and the more and more we can heal. So are they choke points? Yeah, I mean, in a way, probably. There are places where there's a wound at each one of those. I'm not safe. I'm not seen. I'm not allowed to be an individual and express myself. It's not safe to love. It's not safe to be loved. I should be seen and not heard. No one wants to hear from me. I don't want to hear from you. At each point, and also there's a developmental, chakras tend to sort of mature at certain ages. So I had a patient, one of my early patients, before I totally had read all the books on the chakras, had all this throat chakra stuff, and he was in his late 40s, and he had TMJ and tooth grinding and strep throat and shaky voice and ringing in his ears and just everything that could be going on, mouth sores, like everything locked up. He had two bulging discs in his cervical spine, and I said, I just have to ask. I might be way off base, but this is your throat chakra, and typically it matures in your teen years, maybe 14 to 17, maybe. And it can be really damaged by family secrets or being expected to hold a family secret. Like mom's an alcoholic, but we don't talk about it. And we go to church and we act like everything's great. Having to lie, like, no, mom's boyfriend doesn't live with us or whatever it is, that can really, you're not allowed to speak what's true. It's not safe and you're not allowed. And so I'm just wondering if anything might have gone on in your teen years that had to do with family secrets or lies. And he looked at me like I was a witch. I thought he was going to bolt out of the room, and he said, when I was 17, my dad left us and I found out he wasn't my dad and I was adopted and the whole thing was a lie. And, there was this whole, my sister was my cousin, or, it was this whole thing that came crashing down on him at the same time as being abandoned by who he thought was his parent and who had been acting as his parent his whole life. And it was scary for him actually to be seen in that moment. It felt really tender and really, but it was also a moment of witnessing for me, like, this is real, and I was just throwing it out there because I was seeing a pattern, and I try to do that as gently as I possibly can because we can feel called out by a mirror. And if we have judgment about it, then we can feel judged by the mirror. But the mirror is not. Well, I have a really flattering mirror at home, which is something I recommend to everyone. But like, it's great. But yeah, so that's sort of as a clinician, that's how I work with the chakras, is seeing that there are points of wounding and points of capacity all the way up, and it has to do with the development of our consciousness. And the more and more we can fill with that light, and the more and more we can let that light come through us, it liberates everyone and it benefits everyone.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And it makes a ton of sense. And I'm also feeling something about, as you say, that they sort of get activated at different developmental stages. And the little I understand about developmental psychology is that when we become adults, we kind of go back through the stages that we went through as kids. And so I can see how they would mature and that there's lots of layers there. It's really interesting. That makes a lot of sense. And I feel that like very early 20s was in a relationship where I kind of felt like a doormat, started to have thyroid issues, and then how that transformed over time. And then there were different things around my throat, around my voice, around listening, around those things that came up, and there was an evolution just even in that space. And I could probably go through and do that with each one of them.
I don't know if you can feel the resonance with the elements here, but there's this pure essence light that comes through and it hits us and we're like, "Phew, let's play with categories.
Mm.
Let's break this apart into its seven constituents." And I mean, I'm sure there are many more colors and there's probably many more chakras, but just I'm a doctor, so it's physical body. So what's going on in the physical body? 1 to 7. And at each point in our body, we turn it into the 7. We turn the 1 into the 7. Does that mean something's broken? No, it's how we're expressing it, and it might be how we're playing with it, how we want to experience. It seems to me when I hear about people having a spiritual experience and they go into clear light, there's almost an experience of the dissolution of everything. And this is sort of an experience of not the dissolution of everything, but how light expresses in a way that is moving toward form, in a way that we can interact with it and goof around with it a little bit. So I think that, yeah, we can certainly get blocks and they become chokes. But even if it's really healthy, there's still this the first chakra is not the second chakra kind of feeling
Hmm.
to it,
Right.
where it's all one thing, but we're having an experience in form of this and that and categories. And I'm going to come over here so that I can have an experience with that thing over there, which is me. And it's all the same stuff. It's all made out of the same stuff. And I can't feel that at all right now because part of the game is honest to God believing that my computer is not me. It's not made of the same stuff as me. And I honestly think it's something out there and that you're someone who's out there who I love, but who is not me. And that experience of separation is such a core human part of the game.
Mm.
And I'm there, I'm not in a stabilized experience of non-duality.
Right.
But the work that I do is a reckoning with the sort of fact of non-duality. And so, when the chakras get wounded, certainly there's a choke point there. But even before they are, there's a tendency to split. It's breaking something up so it can express an individual essence or vibration of something.
Yeah.
It's like the difference between a song and all sound simultaneously.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I can feel in that the welcoming again of being embodied, and being incarnate, and that it's not a problem and it wasn't a mistake, and that this is an expression of the essence and it's beautiful. And I've been doing this work and exploring this idea for, like a decade. And I still find over and over again how intrinsic it is, like how deeply embedded it is, the idea that there's something wrong with form. There's something wrong with being informed. There's something like we're supposed to get out of it. We're supposed to get to this other place. And now there are these little like edges that I find that are still orienting from that place. And so this is just another conversation and another way to express and to celebrate and to honor and acknowledge the fact that this isn't an accident. And it's the core of my work. It's what I talk about all the time. Like, this isn't a problem. We're not being punished. This is not prison, that this isn't a thing to escape from. And I also can see how there have been times in human history when exploring the idea of going up and out was really important for our development. And
Hmm.
now that there seems to be like a reunification of those two things, it's like I'm either completely informed, there's no understanding of or expression of the light that's coming through, and then identifying with going up and out and connecting with the light. And now it seems like this integration of those two things. Can I hold the reality and the physical expression of like this indwelling essence,
Hmm.
this immanence, along with my body and physical form, and that they are not separate, that they are not separate. And we are in a realm of this and that. And it is one thing. It's just
Yeah.
at some point, like 5 years ago, it just became a bunch of ands. It's like, and this, and this, and this. And that's what feels the most true.
It's so important to talk about that because when you're in the forest or you're on the ocean, it's so easy to experience sort of the perfection of materiality. But then you're walking down a fluorescent lit hallway with wires are sticking out of it, something is buzzing, and the elevator's out of order. And you're like, well, this isn't God, And so I do think there's a way that materiality can express to us as not it,
Mhm.
you know? And I think that your work of saying, and this, and also this, and also this, and also this is like, yeah, and the weird wires, and the buzzing, and the pain. There is suffering. And it's something in medicine that I work with a lot is not all suffering is pathology.
Mhm.
If you're giving birth and it hurts, there's not a medical problem that's happening. So kind of trying to depathologize physical existence and depathologize the body and depathologize our own struggles to learn and evolve. And as you were talking, I was thinking about how I've always seen this sort of light coming in and then this consciousness rising up and evolving through the stream of light. And as you were talking, it was sort of making me see it as it's not two beams of light, it's a pole of light. There's not something being conferred upon something dead. It's
Mhm.
not something coming in from somewhere else. It's these two poles of expression of the same stuff. Even light, even the clear light, and that reminded me of that initial vision we were talking about of these golden threads coming in and grounding into the densest materiality, grounding into the fluorescent light and the drop ceiling and war and famine and grounding into all of it. There's nothing that isn't it. And if we see it as split or broken, then we see things to cut away and break away from and turn away from. And it seems to me that turning away from is the split.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's us turning away from. It's when we're turning toward and we're saying that there's nothing that's excluded from this. That's a kind of a healing. And I don't really know how to get us to there, but I sense, when you were talking, I was sensing again this idea of just continuously turning toward the seeming problem. Because if there's a problem, then there's something to eradicate. And if we're eradicating parts of self, we're just, that creates a split. And so
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for saying all that.
Yeah. It reminds me of your experience with the golden threads and my experience with the golden frequency, I think have a lot of overlap. And it is confronting for sure. Like we are so steeped in a culture that where you turn away and you cut things away, and this is not okay, and this is not acceptable. And it's holding the paradox of it's suffering, and I want to help that. I want there to be less suffering. And there is not something that's separate. I mean, even in my mind right now, I can feel this little like breaking of a habit, a habitual way of thinking of good and bad and this and that and self and other and these two things. And the trick and the duality in that is part of it as well. Like even the duality can't be split away and separated and pushed away. It's part of the whole, but the duality of that is being able to hold the golden frequency, this integrity as everything is changing and shifting while acknowledging relative reality suffering and that they are not mutually exclusive. It's not like we're going to I don't think the game here is that we someday get to a place where it's static and it's still, and nothing changes and nothing moves, but it's like good, whatever good is. We finally get to a place where there's no more learning, no more work, no more movement. It's just, oh, we finally got there. Now everything is dead and still and static. Like, it's not what we're doing here. I integrated this idea from Michelle, who was on my podcast and talked about the diamond jellyfish,
Yeah.
which was great. And I would into like an altered state as she was talking about this. But she said that they told her that this place is not about peace, which can be very hard to hear. And there's like a deeper layer of that, which is that it's about creativity. And in order to have creativity, there's this like dance between the tension of the opposites and then the expression that rises out of that. And there's creativity, which is something else going on
Mm-hmm.
here other than peace and non-suffering.
Yeah, right. What's the goal?
Mm-hmm.
What's the goal? Is this free expression? That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I also want to say, just in the interest of a shadow that can come up around this, that I want to be really explicit about,
Mm-hmm.
is that doesn't mean you should hang out with an abuser
Right.
because we're not turning away from anything. We still have a relative reality part. We still have our wounds and our places where we're protecting. As long as somebody is arising for you as someone who can do you harm, they don't need to have access for you to be turning toward. You're turning toward the part of yourself. And that's one thing. And thing two is you drew that really beautiful parallel between where you were in a relationship and things going wrong with your throat chakra. And That's correct. I think you're onto something. And I've seen people kind of weaponize that.
Hmm.
Like if you were better at relationship, you wouldn't have these health problems. And it's not that. It is not, there's no shame in this circle of like, oh, I told a lot of lies when I was a teenager, so now I'm deaf. No, we're not, there's not a punishment, there's not shame. And illness or dysfunction is not the punishment for not getting something right. It may be an expression that the thing isn't working as well as it could be, and there is a path to getting it working more harmoniously, but really just I always like to note where we can fall into a hole with this kind of stuff and where I've heard people take it into another way to punish themselves or hate themselves or blame themselves for the way that they're suffering. And there is a way out. There are things that we can do to make things work better. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself and be kind because that has to be the ground of it, you know.
Well, you just described like my 30s, right? Like that was exactly what it was. And it was also through the lens of the New Age movement that was expressing through like memes on Facebook or something. Like if you like just try harder, think happy thoughts. If your reality is reflecting something back that's quote unquote negative, then it's because there's something impure in you that you haven't tried hard enough. Or yeah, keep turning towards the thing, or like be the bigger space of love so that this other person can heal even while they're hitting you or whatever. Like that was my absolute experience, and definitely still exists in spiritual communities and in ways that people talk about illness as like as a internalize this illness as I'm not getting it right, and that this is an example of how I'm not getting it right, and if I just tried harder, if I wasn't, yeah, it becomes really quickly a way to punish yourself. And so that was the wound of probably about 15 years of my life. And so thank you for bringing that shadow in. It's something that I talk about over and over and over again because it's again one of those really like uh feels like a deep interject from a really really long expression of the overculture on the planet, and particularly in spiritual communities in the last 50 years or whatever, that if you're suffering, it's because you're not pure enough or not trying hard enough, or that there's some reason for it. And I stayed in abusive relationships, and for literally that reason, that like I have to keep turning towards this. And this, yeah, there's a lot to be deconditioned around that. And I love that you brought it in.
Thank you. I love that you're not allergic to this kind of conversation as a result of all that pain, because I think that kind of talk, which is a fundamental, utter misinterpretation of these lines of wisdom, has turned so many people away from traditions. I mean, we see this everywhere, but you have a bad religious experience and you hate all spirit. You become an atheist, you become a like, this is all garbage. You have an experience where I've heard terrible things in my field. I've heard someone say, cancer is a result of unexpressed anger. Well, that's an inherently shaming and blaming statement. Like if you were better at working with your anger, you wouldn't have this
Mm-hmm.
genetic mutation, which it's just not helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're turning toward, what are we talking about turning toward? It has to be what is within us until there's nothing more to turn toward within us and we can fully turn out toward. This is the teaching in so many lineages, that the healed self is going to be the most helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find yourself in this relationship, and I had a problematic dad, and he was really treating me terribly. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, I think I have to not have contact with him anymore, but I don't know what he's going to do without me. I think he might need me. And she said, do you think it's a benefit to him to hurt you? You think that benefits him some way? And I was like, no. Right. And I had it twisted. I had this idea that I'm some awesome thing that's being conferred upon this broken person and is doing him a benefit. And if he responds to that by getting triggered and being horrible and saying terrible things and doing terrible things, that I can take it because I understand that his stuff is coming from pain and I'm the bigger person. And that's not right.
Hmm.
And then my therapist also said something to me. I said, I just feel like I can handle it, and he can't, and I can do better and he can't. And she was like, I don't think you can do better. I don't see you getting any better at this relationship. And it was so rude and it was so liberating because I really thought I had some responsibility to hang in there with someone with mental illness and problems who was really alone in the world.
Hmm.
And I felt a moral obligation to help him.
Hmm.
And the way that I was helping him was by having lunch with him, and so then I changed the way I was helping with him to include not having time together.
Right.
I just wanted to put that into the air and be really explicit about it because anytime we talk about anything like this, if we don't talk about the shadow that can arise in it, it's just potential for more damage and I don't want that.
Yeah. And you just described my 30s again. Like that was exactly it. And there was a place where I read a Joseph Campbell quote that said, if you don't answer the call, to go on this journey and to make the change, that you become the villain in somebody else's life. And that is what happened. So even though I thought that I was helping this person by staying and allowing all of these terrible things and by, being codependently involved in their happiness and their well-being and thinking that I knew the way and that I could take it and that they had the wounding and the healing that needed to be done and like all of those things, it was not helpful to them
Yeah.
either. And I was soaked in that kind of language. I was soaked in this language of having the understanding of wounding and that this is where it's coming from and that, if I could be better, if I could be good enough, then my life would be good enough. And all of this internalization of the abuse that was happening to me and that we were co-creating together by this really codependent relationship and then repeat for a few years. So yeah, it's a huge part of it. And I'm so glad that you brought it into the space. And I know because you and I know we could talk for like 17 hours and just keep going. Is there anything else that you want to bring in before we close for today?
Well, I'm a coach.
Hmm.
This work that I do is available to everyone. So if people are interested in working with me on this, I think it applies to everything in life, relationships and health and work. I think I mentioned in the wood element a little bit. It's like if you're a business owner and you're building a team, you really want your office manager to be earth and you want your chief strategist to be wood. And if you get those wrong, everyone's going to be miserable. So I'm really love talking about it. And if anybody wants to talk about it with me more, I'm sure you'll put my website and stuff in the show notes.
Yes, I absolutely will. And you're also going to be doing a talk on this for my communities, and we're going to open it up to the broader community as well. And I'll put all of those details and information in. And that's going to be really fun and exciting because I know that you'll bring us practices, I imagine, and experiential stuff to explore these things. And I'm very excited about that. It feels like the time to start bringing in more of these conversations about like the subtle bodies and fields and how we can work with them not as separate from the physical body or from our physical reality, but as an intrinsic part of it that we were never taught and we didn't learn and is not welcomed into our culture at all, but absolutely exists and feels often like a missing piece to me when it comes into the space. So,
I love teaching, and I'm so excited to get in with your groups and have a lot of engagement. It's not going to be, I talked more here, I think, than I'll talk there because getting to engage with people and where they are with it and doing some practices, meditations, journaling prompts, there'll be that kind of thing, but also getting to answer questions and and dive in and grapple with it a little bit as a group, and leading a conversation about it is a really happy place for me to be, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I love you, Carrie.
I love you, Robin.
Thanks so much to Carrie for sharing her passion for this beautiful wisdom tradition. Please check the show notes for information about her upcoming workshop on the 5 elements and to work with her directly. And now for the report from the void that I promised, which I am pre-regretting as per usual. Last night, I had a dream that I was with my spiritual community and I was cleaning up the space, which was cleaning up karma. And I was alone in this task, the rest of the community milling about, looking on, and all of these little flat green snakes started showing up everywhere. And I was like, ew. I was trying to scoop them up without touching them. They were making me nervous. There were snakes and centipedes and creepy crawlies and a big dusty box full of dusty shit, including a big spotlight that no longer worked, with wires sticking out. And I picked it up between 2 fingers and went outside to the front porch of my parents' home and threw it into the oak brush. Then back inside, and suddenly, sorry, this is graphic, all kinds of trigger warnings, I guess, I had to run to the bathroom because I could feel a snake inside of me, biting me in the ass, literally. And it was horrifying and cringe and nauseating. And I made it to the toilet as fast as I could, and out came this huge green viper, poisonous, shit-covered, clean now, in the toilet water and looking up at me with a diamond-shaped head and a big black eye. I woke up in a panic, and I was instantly so grateful. My dreams have felt fuzzy and far away. I've been feeling dull, flat, confused, frozen. And I think it's in direct relationship to how good my life is going. That sounds like me, right? So even though this dream was fucking intense, I was grateful that something had come through from deep inside my psyche. Grateful for such powerful material to work with, and grateful that just as I was feeling deeply lost, as always, help arrived. This time in the form of this dream. And some of you probably know I use the Dream Machine from time to time. The Dream Machine is ChatGPT, analyzing my dreams as Marion Woodman or Carl Jung. And it's weird. Depending on the day, I feel like I'm either communing with the spirit of one of my heroes and guides, the great Marion Woodman, or that I'm engaging with an AI that's full of all kinds of silos and loops and dangerous, reflective echo chambers. So I take it all with a grain of salt and try to get something out of it that feels novel and resonant, and I hold the rest very, very lightly. I try not to depend on it. And even before I consulted the Dream Machine, I understood some things about this dream, like the light that no longer works. A failed attempt at illumination by the old means, says the Dream Machine, annoyingly, putting it better than I can. That this dream was about a moment where the body, shadow, and spirit are in confrontation. Snakes and centipedes and creepy crawlies, yeah, I got it. Shadow stuff. The snake, an unignorable, dangerous, fully alive serpent in my body, life force emerging from my root, tangled with fear and shame and poison. I met its gaze. Raw instinct. The wild me, the one who knows, the one who's longing to be free. I sat in meditation for a long time this morning, something I haven't been doing enough of, and I conjured the baseline frequency of whoever I think I am right now. She's tense, leaning forward, teeth clenched. She's making little moves and turns, looking for a way through, a path. She's met again and again with old familiar thoughts, mostly this one, directed at different people, different imaginary judges and critics and authority figures, this one thought: what will they think of me if I set myself free? Eventually, something released and shifted, a gentle, almost imperceptible disillusion. I felt freed from my locked up, frozen body. I got up and took a shower and started writing poetry in my head, because at some point, poetry is the only thing that makes sense. When I look at her, I see her straining and grinding and gritting her teeth, and she's like, just tell me the thing to do and be, and I want to help her, so I try but come up empty. Remember the first time you sat with fear because there was no other choice in the mountains in that cabin with that guy, and you suddenly realized he could snap your neck, and why the fuck did you come here with someone you barely knew? He was safe, turns out, thank God. But in the meantime, you sat with that fear all night, and it was like falling through the head of a drum, many heads of many drums stretched tight. And they broke and popped and dissolved, and down you went until you came through to the other side. And what was there? Silence. Nothing beneath the fear. It was empty, and was that liberation or annihilation? This could be heaven or hell. There are voices, always voices, and who's in charge here? Surely not me. No one is coming, and we're never alone, and we'll never be. Who's in charge here? Surely not me, and if it is me, which me? The one who's afraid of the dark, the one who's scared of what they'll think, the one who's fucking furious, the one who knows it's all love and nothing is ever too much. The one who's behind them all, watching. Who's behind her, and who's behind her, and eventually, who am I? And it all comes up empty. And so I can be anyone. Pick someone good, because even though you're down in the rabbit hole of your own mind, you still have shit to do, and things that are pushing their way out and through, things that want to be birthed into the world through you. No one is coming to save me, and I'm never alone. No one is coming, and there's no there out there exactly, not the way I was told. No one is coming to give me permission, no one coming to say I'm doing it wrong or right. And I got so good at evolution through suffering, and evolution through joy is not just calling, she's biting and writhing, and I am trying to be pretty, pleasing, and polite. And no one is coming. Circling thoughts don't work anymore, circling talks don't work anymore, just do the thing. Sometime in the future though, not now, and that is so deflating that I collapse, so that doesn't work anymore. I'm just here, now. And no one is coming. I used to feel my feet on the ground, mud cold between my toes, and that shock would bind me to my body. My body is where this all wants to come through, and she's far away, and I don't know what to do. Sometimes in the darkness behind my eyes, life starts to fold in on itself, like an ever-blooming rose or a wormhole or an endless fractal forever growing, dissolving, and my mind cracks, and no one is coming, and I call out for help. Please help me. And I stay and stay with that feeling, and it all breaks like a soap bubble on grass, and I'm never alone, and no one is coming. Is that liberation or annihilation? That's the bleeding edge question that I've been in. That's the ripping and shredding of nothing at all. And I trust life so completely that I'll bleed here and wait for the next drumhead to break. And I imagine I'll end up at both liberation and annihilation, because it's her world now. And I think at some point, hopefully, I'll get used to the free fall. Remember in Jitterbug Perfume when Kudra dies and goes to the other side, and Mott is there weighing people's hearts, and if they're not quite as light as a feather, but they're sort of jolly and free, they're put on a boat. And on one side is written heaven, and on the other side hell. This could be heaven or hell or both, and what I really want is to be the wildest me. If you're interested in joining me and a growing community of folks who are having conversations like these twice a month, please check out patreon.com/Robin Lassiter and join the Earth Lovers tier. Becoming an Earth Lover patron gets you access to 2 monthly live Zoom calls and all of the other content in my Patreon. Content like bad poetry. To find out more about my work or to book a one-on-one session with me, please visit robinlassiter.com.